Okay, you've got your nice long list of projects appearing in your reserve study. Whether it's tens or even hundreds of components, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. In this portion of our Reserve Studies 101 webinar, we'll show you how to find out which handful of components really drive your reserve funding needs. We'll also address how good preventive maintenance can extend the life of your reserve components, why you can't rely on insurance to make some things new, and how taking good care of your reserve components on an ongoing basis boosts home values. It's your association. Your components are on display every day. Having an effective reserve component list is all explained by the attitude, we own it and we need to take care of it.
Fantastic, Christian. So now that we've made the point that the components create the foundation of the reserve study, meaning that all the financial analysis is going to be done on top of that identification of which projects happen, at which time, for what cost, and also know how the component list is selected. As Christian suggested, we're going to turn to the topic of, okay, now how does that affect us? How does the component selection affect our decision-making and our financial plan that results? So Christian, let me turn it back over to you for this next section of the webinar today.
Awesome. Yeah, so we got that foundation in place. How does it affect us? And really kind of the question that you want to ask yourself is, and maybe you can do this as an exercise right now, think about your association, think about your community. What are the 5 or so different major projects that really drive the funding plan for your reserve study? I see that about 80% of people polled that they have a professional reserve study in place. So think about those big projects as we're talking about this. When we're thinking about that component list, we said about 5 or so are really doing that. And really kind of what it boils down to, we call it the big 6 in the Pacific Northwest. And most of those are about exterior cladding. So when we take a look at those dominant components, Robert, really for condominiums and townhomes, we're looking at roofing, painting, asphalt, roadways. Again, in Pacific Northwest areas, Northeast areas, it really comes into play when you're talking about all of exterior cladding from top down. Maybe when you're talking about high-rise communities, there's more mechanical systems rather than asphalt or roadways. There's more interior renovation type of projects. If you're in an HOA or a PUD, you know that roadways are much more substantial. And then also the recreational components like playgrounds are shockingly expensive for those that have experienced that. So again, it's coming down to these real core components that we want to pay attention to in the planning process. Of course, we're going to pay attention to the boiler system in the common room that is going to affect overall quality of life, functionality. But again, when we're talking about the major dominant drivers, we want to think about these core elements. And when we think about those core elements, our natural inclination is to go to the largest dollar bill sign that we see, right? But we want to make sure that we're taking a look at the frequency as well. And that's when we're talking about cost per year. And that's a big thing to think about, right? So on its head, we see in our seesaw example here, $100,000 on its, on the face of it is much more impactful than $50,000. However, when we take a look at frequency, say this $100,000 component is the roof, and say the $50,000 component is paint. We can see how that plays out when we take a look at the frequency of these projects. A roof may last for 20, 25 years, and painting should be factored, depending on the material, somewhere around 5 to 10 years. So that painting project, even though it is half as much, is happening 4 times as often. So that cost per year you'll see is $10,000. And that can be also called the deterioration rate as well, if you're looking at a different study that may call it something different. But when you look at those differences, we see, okay, great, we've got this $100,000 component, but it's only $5,000 a year impact. And then we have the $50,000 component that's $10,000 a year. So you see the difference there. And so as we talk about significance and impact and domination of reserve components here, we always want to make sure that we discuss the importance of updating the reserve study so that these projects are precise. As we talked about a little bit before, we do really expect that as the years move forward and we gather more and more information, especially about major projects, that these figures are refined. And that just helps the community plan better and better. And so with National Reserve Study standards really being updated in 2023, best practice around the United States is having that site inspection every third year. And the between years really should also be taking a look at all the different components and their costs, reserve balances, anything that's really changed at the community should be factored on an annual basis. And so when we're talking about the impact of all this, right, again, we're going back to that 3-part test as a foundation for what is going on at our communities. And anybody who's been involved in insurance recently knows that climate is changing very, very quickly. If you haven't, I would suggest taking a look at your deductible and how that's changed over the years. I'm sure that will be surprising to you. So a question that we get along that line is, can we factor the insurance deductible as a reserve component, right? So it's a great opportunity for us to take the 3-part test and take a look. Is that a common area element? Sure, absolutely. We could argue that. Is it significant cost? Absolutely it is. However, when we talk about anticipation, when is that going to happen, right? When did something like an accident or an act of God happen at a community? Well, we simply don't know that, and that's the nature of the plan. It's just not suitable for reserves. Even though we would love something like that to be covered, it's just simply not, and it's a good reason to keep money in operating funds for those emergency types of situations, and that is actually a really good lesson to talk about in terms of tax and the IRS elements. Robert, can you shed some light on that side of things?
Certainly. The IRS defines capital projects. Sometimes people call those reserve projects, but sometimes not. But the IRS defines capital projects as replacing a thing. And so the IRS doesn't consider a roof inspection or tree trimming or asphalt sealing or even paint application as a capital project. And so there's some people that think that they can't reserve for such things. And the bottom line is, do your taxes according to tax standards and do your reserve planning according to reserve standards. And Christian's been talking about your major projects that are the association's obligation, right? Reasonably anticipated and a significant cost. So do your reserve planning based on those 3 standards, not tax standards.
Brilliant, Robert. Thank you. Yeah, and as we take a look down at this yes column here, really the updated 3-part test gives us the ability to take a different look at these bullet points here. Extended life projects, those are projects that we're talking about that are over the 30-year mark. Those could be something like a seawall or really durable siding that's anticipated to last like 50 years. Some of those things haven't been looked at in the past, and the reserve study standards are now taking a closer look at those things. Phased projects, partial replacements, professional inspections, major scheduled maintenance, all new things that are very much looked on very well in reserve studies, especially when it comes to elements of professional inspections and major scheduled maintenance. And yeah, this is again all about minimizing risk. And we want to simply make sure that we minimize the amount of surprises that are going to happen. We know surprises are going to happen anyway, but we want to make sure that we get ahead of the things that we can get ahead of. And it's about having a good plan. And when we take a look at this cycle here, where we look at reserve planning, infrastructure inspections, and preventive maintenance, these are all working together really well. Preventive maintenance really allows the reserve projects to either be extended perhaps, or at least meet their service lives, right? So take, for example, asphalt. If you have the asphalt resurface project at 20 to 25 years, that overall service life really is assuming that you take care of the normal crack sealing projects around the 3 to 5 year timeline. If you don't do that, you have basically that asphalt, depending on usage and location, could be more along the lines of a 15 to 20 year project. So typically, especially with asphalt, the cost for those larger projects is quite a bit more than, say, crack sealing and repair. So having that preventive maintenance done, it really does influence the overall plan. So keeping on top of that is good money spent. And then also influencing that are things like infrastructure inspections, plumbing inspections, electrical inspections, really high cost projects that really do affect the overall plan. Those should be a part of your overall maintenance and reserve study process. And in chatting about reserves or insurance and reserves and that intersection a little bit more, we want to make sure that it's very clear that insurance and reserves are very separate things. And insurance is not something to be relied on as part of an overall plan to take care of the ongoing deterioration of the community. Two different sides. Insurance plays its role in accidents and acts of God and things like that. Deterioration is not an accident. Those are things that we can see coming. And that is the reason that we want to have a great plan in place for the things that we can see and for the things that we can't see.
Fantastic. Hey, Christian, these photos are mine. You can see a dock on the left that I didn't want to walk out on just because of it was just a hazardous situation. It was moving even right where it was connected to the seawall. And then the very upheaval of the concrete sidewalk on the right. These are clear safety hazards. There's no excuse to find these types of situations at your association. These are going to drive your insurance rates higher. So spend your reserves on taking good care of your property. These are board failures. Don't let these types of things happen at your association. And then just think not only what it does to your insurance costs, but think what deterioration does to your home values. The drop in home values due to this type of deterioration is huge compared to the monthly budgeted reserve funding that would have prevented these eyesores. So think of it from a real estate agent point of view. Don't shoot yourself in the foot, losing thousands of dollars in property values to save just a few $100s in reserve funding. And that's the comparison that it boils down to.
At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.